My name is Morgan Kelly Moss, and I'm currently based in Los Angeles, although I'm zooming from my family home in Pennsylvania right now. So, the painting that Storks is based upon is actually a painting by my grandmother on my dad's side, affectionately known as Mimi. Um, she has always been a really wonderful role model for me growing up. She was a nurse for a very long time, but she also at some point went back to school to be an artist, and since then has won like so many different art competitions down in Texas. And yeah, she's really great. And growing up, I also liked to paint a lot, so I always would try to like copy what she was doing, and it was impossible because she was so good. But, anyway, as I grew up and I figured out my art was more, music related, I wanted to write something that was based on one of her paintings because I could never really do it correctly with paint. But
Mm.
I thought maybe with notes I could sort of try to recreate something that she did. For me, a lot of my inspiration comes from of any kind, visual media of any kind. I do a decent amount of film score as well, so I think that's kind of why the painting inspired a lot of music because I am used to like seeing something visual and reacting to it musically a little bit. A lot of my inspiration comes from nature though, most of it. I would even dare to say for sure. I grew up in Pennsylvania where I am currently, and I feel so lucky to have grown up here because it's just like an oasis of nature, in my opinion. And then, lately having moved to LA, it's so different, but it's so beautiful and it's a lot of new inspiration for me. So I would say visuals and nature are
Mm.
like my two things for sure. Oh, it's been great. I mean, people say it's like the land of opportunity or whatever, which is 100% true. It's totally true. I think everything that they say about it is true. There's a lot that I really love about it. And of course, I really miss like deciduous trees.
Mm.
But I
Mhm.
think there's lots of other things that I love about it. I've actually been working with at Bear McCreary's studio, Sparks and Shadows, a lot lately, over last summer and the winter break and this summer as well, which has been awesome. So, and that's an opportunity that I wouldn't have gotten, if I stayed in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and everything like that. And I've been also studying at UCLA with Richard Danyapur, which has been amazing. So a lot of really, really good stuff has come from me moving there. It was very scary, but I'm really glad that I did it for sure. Yeah, this was actually composed a little while ago, and it was edited pretty heavily when I had a performance last year. But I learned a lot just about composing, like, period, through this piece. I actually got the idea while I was falling asleep. And it was one of those things where, like, I heard it, and I was like, I have to write that down right now. And I did. I like got up and I wrote it down on a piece of staff paper, and then in the morning I was like, who wrote that? Was that me? It was a really interesting thing. I don't think before that I had ever had a piece of music like grab me like that, It was really interesting. And then through the process of composing that piece, I really tried to let the music lead me the right direction rather than saying, oh, I want it to be this form and I want it to have this sort of tonality and whatever. I kind of just let the music take me on that one, and it's still one of my favorite pieces probably that I've written. So it really taught me to like just trust what's in my ears and in my brain and not focus too much on trying to be impressive or anything like that. The editing process was also super, super helpful figuring out, I'm a pianist. So the piano part, not difficult for me, but I am not a strings player whatsoever. So I had to learn a lot about what works well for strings and what doesn't work well. And it was really, really fun to work with a couple of my friends on that, on a couple of different occasions with this piece. I actually had not, no, which is wild because it's probably my favorite instrumentation now, and I need to write some more piano trios for sure. I think at that point I hadn't written a ton of music, just like period. I actually started as a piano performance major at Temple
Mm.
University, which was great, and that was kind of like my little narrow window into, the music world. But eventually I was like, that's not it wasn't enough for me. I wanted like more and more and more just music. So I think at that point I was a junior and I only added the composition major when I was a like second semester freshman. So I think that might have been one of my very first attempts at writing anything for like strings and piano, which was kind of wild, but I'm really happy that this piece kind of took me to another level compositionally. I had always kind of like messed around on the piano and improv'd and stuff and made up little songs and tried to write things down, but it never, I guess, occurred to me that that could be something that I could do full time. I even, when I was like, it was probably 11 or 12, I wrote or I arranged Firebird for my middle school band, and we actually did it, which was like I am forever thankful for my band director who, 2 years later, then I did like a John Williams film score medley for them for my high school band. And then in my senior year, I actually wrote my first full like wind ensemble piece, which was so awesome. And I'm so thankful for his name is Jim Likens over at Northwestern Lehigh. But I am so thankful for him because he kind of showed me that like, yeah, you can totally do that. And I don't know why it never totally occurred to me that maybe that's the direction I should go rather than piano. But I think just because I love teaching as well. So teaching piano was always kind of what I thought I wanted to do. But then I got into college and like I said, it just like wasn't enough, if that makes sense. And additionally, like I'm a fine piano player, but there are so many others that were way better than me. So
Mm.
it was kind of a wake-up call when I was like, oh gosh, I think I'm really, really good at this other thing that I'm not doing full time. So I actually ended up doing both because there was no minor in composition. I would have to get a double major. And then I was kind of just like, you know what? Let's just do whatever. Let's just do it. It's fine. I'll be fine. And I was sort of fine. It was really difficult to get that all done in 4 years. I think especially when I first started composing, everything was very like triadic because that's, when you go to the piano and you put your hands down, that's just, what happens with your fingers a lot of the time. So it's been interesting to try to like break out of that a little bit, break out of like just things that I'm comfortable with, if that makes sense. But I think I finally am really happy that I've gotten to a point that I don't feel like everything I write is just triads. And I don't think that's the case with this piece at all. I think this is one of the first pieces where I was like, I would like to challenge myself harmonically, but in a way that's advantageous for sure. I think that writing for piano is super natural for me for sure. And then additionally, I do feel like I have lots of composer friends who maybe are singers by trade or violinists or something like that, and they think a lot more horizontally, maybe like this line and then this line and then this line. Whereas for me, I've always thought much more vertically about the harmony is like the most important thing for me, like what's going on with that. So a lot of the time I get really wrapped up in like bitonality and polytonality, and I think it's so cool. But yeah, I think it's definitely been both sometimes a hindrance, but also a total advantage sometimes to be a pianist. Film actually has been a huge way for me personally to see how different forms of art coincide, if that makes sense. So you have like the dramaturgy part, of course, the story is super important and you have the writing, but you also have, the visual part of it, like the cinematography and all of that. And of course, like the music was something that always spoke to me personally. I think that being able to blend different kinds of art, especially with this particular opportunity, and show people that it doesn't have to just be music or art or dramaturgy or whatever. It can be all of it at the same time. And I definitely enjoy attempting anyway to make some sort of like overarching experience for the audience. This is definitely one of the first times that I did try doing, art with music, which I think it went over really well. I think people really enjoyed looking at the painting and then listening to the music, but it's also inspired me to do lots of other like intersectional art related things. So at some point I had my friend write a poem for me, and then I wrote a song based on that poem, and lots of kinds of things like that, where we're like trying to figure out what the coolest possible thing is. So I do appreciate this opportunity to like show that different kinds of art can be combined to do something even cooler than we thought originally. I've been working in film score for a decent amount of time. I had a very close friend and colleague that I worked with for a really long time in high school and through college as well. He went to Ithaca for film, and I'm very, very thankful that we were able to collaborate for that whole time that we were very close friends and all that good stuff. I didn't realize at first, but really film music might have been the reason that I did music at all, you know? I was so like obsessed with especially like the ET soundtrack, especially there's this huge cue at the end called like Escape, Chase, and Goodbye. I used to listen to that all the time. And then same with like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings too, all those things. I really do think that is the reason that I got into music at all. And of course I was raised on like baby Mozart's, not little Mozart's, baby Mozart's, which was probably my first introduction to classical music at all, maybe. And of course, I watched lots of Barbie movies as a kid, so there was like Swan Lake and Nutcracker and whatever. I think that film, while it's been so fun to work on, it was also probably the reason that I got into music at all, which is super, super neat. But now living in Los Angeles, I definitely have done a decent amount of stuff just with colleagues at UCLA. I just did two animations that, well, one of them won Best Animation. I was so happy for her, the director. It was great. And then also a couple of friends in the Los Angeles area just doing some short films and things like that. It's been really wonderful. And then, of course, working at Bear McCreary's studio has been a life-changing experience. I was there interning while we did the Percy Jackson soundtrack, the new show. Oh my gosh, I was nerding out the whole time because that was like also a huge thing for me as a kid. I loved Harry Potter, but I like Percy Jackson pretty much just as much. So it was a really like it was life-changing to see the whole process of how it works and everything. And I'm going back to work there this summer, so there's definitely a prospect of me hopefully crossing all my fingers doing some writing or something for them sometime very soon. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. Classically, definitely have been listening to a lot of John Adams, and I always listen to lots of Jennifer Higdon. I think that she and I have very, very similar harmonic languages, but sometimes she'll do something that I never thought of doing. And I never copy, copying's not allowed, but it's very inspiring to see what she does with notes that I hadn't thought of. And of course, my teacher, Richard Danielpour, I've been listening to pretty much everything he's ever written, just because it's so helpful to know his repertoire, when we're in lessons. Also, it's just some of the greatest music like ever. And I'm always listening to Stravinsky. It's like kind of I can't get away from it for sure. But other than the classical side of it, I really listen to pretty much every kind of music. Lately I've been super into like acoustic folk music and like Lord Huron and Bon Iver, those kinds of folks. And before that, I had like an R&B phase, and then before that, it was like lots of classic rock. So honestly, I listen to pretty much everything. I know it's kind of like a cop-out answer, but yeah, there you go. I get almost frustrated sometimes because I feel like new classical, quote, quote, music is so in this box of like you have to kind of do it this certain way and it can't sound good. No, not that it can't sound good. It can't sound predictable or satisfying in the way that, like, if you go listen to some R&B, it's very predictable, and especially folk music is like two chords the whole time, so I think for me that is actually coalesced in a different kind of way than for most people. I have this classical influence, but then also the pop rock R&B side is really important to me. So I think my music is different from others just because it has that influence in there. It's not super present all of the time, but there are sometimes, like recently I wrote a piece for uh, piano quintet plus double bass and electric guitar. It was super fun. It was awesome. It was such a good collaboration. So it was combining basically my rock influence with like my classical influence, kind of John Adams style, sort of minimalist-esque stuff. So yeah, I think for me it was kind of more of like a comprehensive influence, not so much like, oh, I really like Stravinsky, so I sound like Stravinsky. Not really. It's kind of like everything has a big influence on what I do, for sure. My process is less of a process and more of like a it takes me when it wants to. So, for example, I mean, I guess a part of my process that's really important to me is I wake up super, super early to make sure that I can write for, maybe like 3 hours or something like that before I go do anything. So sometimes that is not super intense, meaning like, if I have to be in class by 11, I'll make sure that I'm up by like 7 or something like that to make sure that I can write for a little bit. But if I have class at 8, that usually means I'm waking up at like 4:45,
Oh,
which is crazy. So Storks was actually the first piece that I ever wrote where I was doing that, waking up at like 5 a.m. to like write before for a couple hours before I had to go anywhere. Um, and that was super, super helpful. I've heard that in the morning, your like critical side of your mind is not quite awake yet, which is good because later in the day, there will be times where I write something and they'll be like, that's stupid. I want to erase it. And most of the time, it's really not stupid. And editing while writing is not super helpful. So this was maybe the first piece that I figured out that just letting it flow out as it comes is like the best possible way to do it. And additionally, part of the process for me is, if I get a commission or something, I have the idea of like, okay, harp and oboe, what am I going to do with that? And then I sort of like let it marinate for a while. So if somebody gives me 3 weeks to write something, usually there's a 1.5 to 2 weeks that are just spent like getting ideas and listening to things and getting inspiration from other places like books and movies and paintings like we talked about. And then usually the notes happen super, super quickly. And then of course drafts are always important. So that's kind of what my process looks like. Lots of marinating. I like to say it's like a piece of chicken. The longer you leave it in there marinating, the better it's gonna taste, hopefully. Usually. So yeah, that's kind of what my process looks like overall. I just had an orchestra piece premiered in Siena, Italy, which was amazing and so great. And I learned so much from that premiere. It's probably, well, definitely, it was the biggest orchestra piece I've ever had played. I've had like a couple chamber pieces played, but not, or like chamber orchestra pieces played, but not full orchestra. So I need to edit that because while it was literally fantastic, and the orchestra was amazing, there were lots of things in there that I didn't expect to happen, like the percussion was way louder than I ever could have imagined and things like that where I kind of overwrote, maybe focused on my wind ensemble days where you can write so much percussion and the winds are so loud it doesn't matter. But um, so editing that, and then I'm also finishing up a harp concerto type thing for my friend Jillian Lopez, who's a harpist, and that'll be played for her DMA recital in, I believe, October or something like that. So that's going to be super fun. And I'm happy with the way it's turning out. It's all nature based, of course. But yeah, and then going back to work at Bear's Studio when I get back in LA. So lots of stuff going on for sure. Well, I definitely want to thank Soli for this amazing opportunity to work with them and have my piece played. If you wanted to check out any of my other stuff, I'm on YouTube. If you just look up Morgan Kelly Moss on the internet, my website, my YouTube, and my Instagram should all come up right away. Morgan Kelly Moss. Yeah, there's lots of Morgan Mosses, but not a lot of Morgan Kelly Mosses. So.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this interview and want to see more like it, check out the 30 by 30 by 30 playlist on our channel. For more information about the 30 by 30 by 30 project, check out the website linked to the right.